Goodbye people, goodbye smog, hello freedom. Hello, huge movie fanatic Nate, stopping on by. This time I'm coming at you to review a kind of a horror movie. And I wouldn't really call it a slasher, we'll just call it like a horror movie from the late 80s. What? Okay, yeah, it's saying artwork and design 1988 Prism Entertainment. It might be a movie made in 80, yeah, it's copyrighted 87, American Video Group. Incorporated in Paradise Filmworks, production all rights reserved. I'm coming at you to review a little known movie by the name of Berserker. And I think in the, when you watch the movie after the title appears, it says like a Nordic shit. I don't know, a Nordic, I can't remember what it says. Berserker, a Nordic horror story or something like that. I don't remember. But this VHS I got, let's see here, probably in 2006 here, half price books clearance, $1 plus tax. This was originally released on Prism. I can actually see, them putting, Arrow Films or something putting on a Blu-ray of this, because obviously Blood Rage was originally put out on Prism Home Video. So, it'd be cool if someone like Arrow or something like that put this out, or maybe Vinegar Syndrome put out a Blu-ray of this. The problem is, in my opinion, the movie isn't really that great, so having a Blu-ray wouldn't really be that great, because it's not particularly that watchable of a movie. Here's the back of the VHS here, with a simple image, horror movie, cliche. What's that say? A group of college students stumble across the chilling legend of a bloodthirsty Viking warrior. So according to old Nordic legend, a berserker was a bloodthirsty warrior who ate human flesh, forbidden a restful death and fated to be reincarnated in their blood kin. So that's basically what a berserker is, according to an old Nordic legend. And as you can see, there's this kind of cool painting. Doesn't that remind you of some kind of album cover? I'm not into, and I want to say it's like 60s or 70s album cover or something. But then underneath here you can see this character of this crazy human guy wearing like a snout of a bear, which is kind of a cool gimmick. So Berserker from 1987. This is a title that obviously I got originally, I think, in 06, and I subsequently put it on DVD. And it should be said that, when I rewatched this recently, I watched the DVD that I made, put the VHS on a DVD so I didn't have to dig out the VCR or whatever. And I was just like, this was another title that I was just like, I knew I had, and just popped into my mind at one point. I'm like, Berserker, why don't I watch Berserker? And when I watched it, I realized why I don't watch this movie. It starts off, really cool with the cliched kind of 80s, 3 guys, 3 girls getting in a big Bronco-ish kind of vehicle with the music blaring, with beers in hand, and heading out into the woods. I mean, it starts like when this movie started, and these kids got together and they're heading off into the woods and stuff with their 80s music blaring. I was like, why don't I watch this movie? This is so cool. And, well, cut to, I don't know what, 30 minutes later or whatever, I'd find, or maybe even less than that, I'd find out why I never watched this, because it's really not very good. One of these guys is actually, one of the 2 guys from the original Slumber Party Massacre, the guys that show up and kind of just, whatever, peep in on the girls in Slumber Party Massacre, and they end up, trying to, him and this Michael Keaton lookalike guy end up trying to help the girls in Slumber Party Massacre. The guy who doesn't look like Michael Keaton is the guy who's actually one of the featured players in this movie. So it was really kind of cool to see him again. I mean, that movie was early 80s and this is kind of mid to late 80s. So to see him back in another one of these horror movies was really kind of cool. So that was one thing about this movie that was kind of cool. Another thing that should be said about this movie is, like so often is the case, this movie actually features the the mid to late 80s thinned down version of John Goff, who would of course appear at the same time in films like They Live and stuff like that for John Carpenter or whatever. But at this time, mid to late 80s, John Goff kind of thinned down a little bit from his more heavier self from the late 70s of Alpha Incident and Drive-In Massacre and all a slew of other kind of movies in the late 70s and early 80s and stuff. So this is a slimmed down version of John Goff, and to be honest, he's almost like too thin in this movie, but he plays a cop, this cop who pulls over the kids on their way to this campground, and basically the guy who's driving all these kids up there, I guess, is familiar with this campground because he and his dad had gone there, when he was a kid every summer or whatever. So this guy knew where he was going. He was just bringing his friends up for a weekend of, whatever, fun in the sun and party hardy or whatever the hell they're gonna do. So, on the way there, just John Goff pulls him over, and they have him play this cop, just kind of really just calm and cool and suave, and I don't know if he's supposed to be like spooky or whatever, but the scene where, he pulls the kids over, and it's just so like just boring. Like, it's just like, I don't know, it seems like John Goff is, I don't know what, he's just not all there or what, but so then there's just a scene which is just pointless, a little bit of an exchange between the cop and the kids and stuff, and then they're let off on their way. And what's so funny is so oftentimes, in the late 70s and stuff, and even the 80s and stuff, I want to say Buck Flowers and They Live as well, possibly. If John Goff is in a movie, so often is the case that George Buck Flower will be as well, and that is also the case with this movie. Buck Flower plays this, what the hell is his name? Pappy. He's an old, Norwegian or whatever the hell kind of accent he's doing in this movie. And what's really interesting is usually Buck Flower's featured in movie as a homeless bum or just some kind of derelict or whatever, and he's usually he's got, missing teeth or whatever. When his role in this movie, he's got like full, I can only imagine is like full dentures in, and it completely makes his face look completely different than we're used to seeing Buck Flower. Like, his mouth is like a completely different shape. It almost doesn't look like Buck Flower. It's just weird because it might be the only movie that I've seen with him in where he's actually got like full dentures, or I can only assume it's dentures in his mouth or whatever, because he looks so goofy with teeth. So that's something that's kind of fun about this movie. And I will say that there's Buck Flower and John Goff are longtime friends or whatever and stuff. So I think one of the coolest things about this movie is there's like a scene just between, Pappy, the character Buck Flower plays, is this guy who basically owns or runs this campground where these kids are going to stay at or whatever. So there's this really cool scene, well, maybe the scene's not cool, but just seeing, Buck Flower and John Goff just, playing a game of chess at night out in the woods or whatever, the cop knows Pappy and stuff, so there's this scene where they're just at night playing chess and just talking or whatever. It's really cool to just see a scene that's just taking its time, obviously probably there just to get the full feature-length running time, but just to see the scene taking its time and having this kind of fun exchange, well, maybe it's not fun, but having an exchange and a little game of chess with Buck Flower and John Goff was probably the highlight of this movie, to be honest. So I don't know, maybe 30 minutes into the movie or something like that, you quickly become aware, or if you're not aware of it by now, you become aware of it around this point. I would imagine this movie is very, 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 very slow, and I would imagine maybe even in 20 or 25 minutes in, you probably come to realize this, where it moves at just a snail's pace, and it's just like, oh my gosh. And early on, when the kids get to the location or whatever, and they're splashing around in the water, there's this funny scene where this quote-unquote hot chick was gonna like take off her top, and she starts to do it or whatever, and then she goes and puts it back, and she's like, no. And it's just like, oh my god. Although that was frustrating for a heterosexual male, it was kind of cool in the late 80s to have something different where, obviously you thought the hot chick's gonna take off her top, and then pretends like she was gonna, and then she's kind of almost winks at the what do you call it, heterosexual males in the audience, and it's just like, no, not, you don't get to see it this time. And I was kind of like, originally I was frustrated, and then I was like, there's more as time went on. I was like, that's just kind of cool in a way, just doing something different. It should be said that later on, of course, we see her like completely naked in the sex scene between her and the guy from Slumber Party Massacre. And what's so creepy about this scene is like she's completely naked, and like you can see her breath, and it's just, oh my god, why do they do, like, I don't know, pick like such a cold time of year to, oh well, it doesn't, I mean, budgets and things come together not always at the right time for, weather and stuff, but who knows, even if you're filming, it could be a cold summer even if you are filming in the summer. But I will say that, this movie, in my opinion, has some of the worst, like, nighttime cinematography ever in a horror movie. It looks like in the sex scene as well, and so many of the scenes later on in the last half of the movie at night, where it seems like the light, the light seems like it's actually just right there. Like, if you were to pan the camera just a titch to the left or whatever, you'd see the light. It's just like they have the light right next to the actors, and it's just like, I don't know, whoever's frickin' cinematographer on this movie is just like a moron, because the lighting at night is so horrible. It's just like, oh my gosh, like, this is how I used to, me and a buddy used to light our movies and shit when, we were 14, making movies in the backyard and stuff, where the light is just right there. And this is an actual movie shot on film, and they're lighting the movie the same way. It's just like, oh my gosh, but the lighting is at night is some of the worst, probably the worst, nighttime lighting I've ever can remember seeing in a horror movie. It's, it's pretty stupid. So the kills that do happen in this movie, I have in my notes here that I think some character gets attacked and potentially killed, or maybe not killed. We'll just say attacked while this one couple's having sex, and there's this, this other character gets attacked. And see, the thing that they do with this movie is, this Berserker or whatever is this crazed man who wears a bear snout or whatever, and probably has claws, attached to his fingers or whatever. So they do this stupid thing in the movie where they oftentimes at night or whatever, they'll just show this bear, like this grizzly bear, walking around just taking a stroll or whatever. And then when someone's attacked, you're kind of supposed to be like, oh, well, that this movie, must be a bear attack movie. The bear must have done it or whatever. So it's kind of the filmmaker's way of trying to, like, I don't know, trick you into thinking it's the bear who's doing all the killing, only to reveal at the end that it's this crazed berserker guy wearing a bear snout and whatever, he's wearing claws or whatever. So often throughout this movie at night and stuff, they'll just show this bear walking around, and then these couple having sex, and this other woman gets attacked by, just through these quick shots. You can't tell what the hell's going on, blurry shots or whatever. Just appears to be getting all, cut up by bear claws and stuff and sliced up. The kills aren't very good at all in this movie. It's just, just blurry imagery cut together quick and just whatever, and and then you'll just see the bear walk away, or however they do it, and they just, throughout the movie they're presenting like this just wandering bear as the killer of these, or the attacker in this movie. It's just like, oh, come on. So I got on my notes here that potentially two character girls do die, and after, like, the two characters or two girls die or whatever, then the rest of the four that remain end up getting lost at night in the woods. And as I said, the lighting during these scenes is just awful. Like, the light is just off camera. And it's just like, oh my gosh. And you're just like, well, this guy who grew up here, with this macho man guy who drove him all up there, is supposed to have grown up here. He should know every inch of these woods. And, I don't know how they walk out into the woods, and then all of a sudden he doesn't know where they are. And it's just like, so just like, I said earlier, this movie's so slow, then they're out in the woods, and there's really nothing enjoyable about them being lost because the lighting sucks, and it's just like, and oh my gosh. And then, I don't know if it's halfway through the movie or maybe more at this point, this bear appears, and it's like, oh my gosh, the viewer is just like, that must be the animal or whatever that attacked everyone or killed the two girls. And then this muscle man wearing a bear snout pops out of the woods and attacks the bear, and there's this half-ass fight between the berserker guy wearing a bear snout and a real bear, and you can tell it's just a bear playing with the trainer or whatever the hell's going on, and really in this scene. And it's like muscle man, berserker fighting the bear, and I don't remember. I can't imagine the berserker wins. I can't remember what happens if they just fight for a while and part ways or whatever. But yeah, berserker versus bear. Ding ding. So if you've made it this far into the movie, like, you're in for more hell, because the last 15 or 20 minutes of this movie are just beyond slow. I just put that on my notes. 15 or 20 minutes of this, last 15 or 20 minutes of this movie so slow. I don't remember having seen this a while ago now, maybe a week or two ago. I can't remember. I mean, that's really all that needs to be said. I mean, if you write on the notes that it's just slow, obviously there's nothing else of worth to even talk about. It's a real bummer, and it's so funny because I was like, why don't I watch this? And then I watched it, and then I'm like, oh, that's why I don't watch this. So you're probably never going to watch this movie, so I don't feel bad spoiling this at all. The stupidest, you think this movie's stupid as it is up until this point, well, just wait how stupid this is. So basically it turns out that towards the end of the movie or whatever, I don't know if all of the kids are killed. I didn't put that on the notes or not. It could very well be all the kids were killed, or maybe all but one or two or whatever. Usually there's a guy and a girl that live or whatever. Maybe that happens in this movie. But at the end of the movie, John Goff, the cop character, actually, gets a rifle or whatever, and he goes out on the hunt for the killer or the bear or whatever. At this point, he just kind of got a look on his face about like he knows what he's going to do and kill or whatever. So basically, I don't know. There's these shots of the berserkers like ah. And John Goff shoots him dead with the rifle or whatever, and then like I can't remember if it's done in some stupid dissolve or something, but basically get this, because Buck Flower had like this Norwegian accent or whatever the hell he's got throughout this movie. Basically, it turns out that Buck Flower is the berserker, which I guess I don't know if the physique of Buck Flower and this guy who played the Berserker in actuality weren't so completely different, it wouldn't have been so stupid. But I guess that's the reason it's so stupid, because obviously Buck Flower, probably at no age in his life, in particular this age that he appears in this movie in 1987, and it has any kind of physique like the muscle man we saw earlier rustling the bear. So that's why it's so stupid. I don't have a problem with, Pappy being the Berserker if Pappy had a muscle man body. I think the idea of having Pappy be the Berserker, aka killer, is not stupid. It's just the fact that the body types of Buck Flower and the muscle man are so completely different, unless of course when he goes crazy his body just slims up and bulks all out with muscle or whatever. They could have done that aspect or whatever. That would have been maybe kind of a little more cool to explain what's going on. But so that's my review of Berserker. I want to say it said like a Nordic nightmare on when you actually watch the movie or whatever. We're going to give it a half of a star out of 4 stars. It starts really, really great at the beginning, like, just the classic, cliched 80s stuff of kids going out into the woods with music and beer and all this shit to have sex and get the girls naked. But, I don't know, halfway through the movie or maybe even before that part, I mean, it just gets so boring and so slow that it's just like, oh my gosh. So it'll be funny if in another 10 years I think about this movie and I'm like, why don't I watch this? And I put it in and then I'm like, oh, that's why I don't watch this. But maybe I'll remember now that this movie unfortunately isn't really that great at the end of the day. So thank you very much for watching this review, and of course, as always, we'll see you on the next one.
Hey, what happened? Where are you, man? God. Holy shit! Fucking dick shit. Come on, you fucker. You fucking kill my friend, I'll kill you. Oh, shit. Come on, take me on. Don't move. I'm in it, fucker. Holy shit! Fucking demon! I didn't do anything. Oh.
You.